Hey everyone, this is Mason Hutchison, and you're listening to Herb Rally, your daily herbal podcast. We come out with new episodes about 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in often. Our goal for the show is to help you along your herbalist journey, no matter what stage you're at. We have over 665 episodes, so feel free to peruse those episodes, and you're bound to find something of interest. Today's show is yet another Herbalist Hour interview, and this one was with my good friend, Rosalee de la Forêt. A few months back, Amanda and I were traveling from Oregon back to Wisconsin, and we stopped in the Methow Valley in Washington State. We got to hang out with Rosalee and Xavier de la Forêt, and just spend a couple days with them. We toured their garden. So today's episode is my interview with Rosalee, and she actually, during the interview, takes us into her garden, and we check out some of the plants growing in her garden. It was very, very early spring in the Methow Valley at the time. So she also, which something really cool, she showed us this yarrow lawn that she's growing, and I never really heard of the concept until the other day. I was walking around my neighborhood here in Appleton, and someone in our neighborhood actually has a yarrow lawn, so I thought that was pretty neat. But if you want the full visual effect, dear listener, you could actually go to our YouTube channel. I'll be sure to include a link to the YouTube video in the podcast show notes, and you could actually, kind of hang out with us in Rosalee's living room and her garden. So, I thought it was very beautifully shot. So kudos to Amanda for doing such a great job with the video. And also, if you didn't know, all of these interviews are on our YouTube channel. So a lot of them are Zooms, but some of them are even in person. So if you want to check out the videos to these, you could go to youtube.com/c/herbrally, or just simply search for Herb Rally in the YouTube search bar. We've been releasing videos every single day of the week on our YouTube channel. I'm not sure how long we'll be able to sustain that, but we've been working hard at the YouTube channel. So please go over there and subscribe. Also, Rosalee de la Forêt has a podcast as well. It's called Herbs with Rosalee. So please go ahead and pause this episode and go hit subscribe on her podcast if you're not already. Likely you probably are, because there's a lot of crossover in our audience, I'm sure. But again, Rosalee's excellent podcast comes out weekly, and it's called Herbs with Rosalee on your podcast player of choice. So also, before we get into the show, I want to say a huge shout out and huge thank you to our Herb Rally Schoolhouse members. Thank you so much for your support. We really couldn't do this without you. So thank you so much for supporting the podcast, supporting the YouTube channel and all that by your membership fees. If you'd like to learn more about the Herb Rally Schoolhouse, you could go to herbrally.com/schoolhouse. You could even get your first 30 days for free by using coupon code podcast at checkout. And our members, they get access to exclusive herbalism classes. They get access to a ton of different teachers in the community. And also, they're able to join us live on the Zoom calls for these Herbalist Hour interviews. So if you'd like to become a member, help support Herb Rally, what we're doing, you could go to herbrally.com/schoolhouse, enter coupon code podcast at checkout, get your first 30 days for free, and you could even join us live for a lot of these Herbalist Hour interviews. So thanks again so much for listening, and now enjoy my interview with Rosalee de la Forêt. Talk to you later.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by my good friend Rosalee de la Forêt. She's the author of Alchemy of Herbs and Wild Remedies and a lot of other things. So welcome to the show today.
Oh, I'm just so thrilled that you're here and that Amanda's here and that we get to hang out. And
Xavier.
And handsome French husband is in the wings too. Yeah.
That's right. And so we're here in the Methow Valley. Can you tell us a little bit about this location?
Sure. So the Methow Valley is located inland in Washington State, a couple miles south of Canada, and it's in the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. And very special, beautiful place, original home of the Methow people. And it's still so many undeveloped hills and mountainsides, and we're sitting here in May, and right now the flowers are just exploding. So we have all sorts of native wildflowers going everywhere, and it's a valley, so one really cool aspect of it is there's the riparian river bed area and the sagebrush steppe, and then it doesn't take much to go higher and higher up all the way up to the alpine. And so because of that, all these different ecosystems, there's just a lot of different flora and fauna, and it's a very beautiful place to love to be outdoors in.
It was honestly one of the most beautiful drives I've ever been on. So
It is.
yeah.
It actually like technically is actually. It's like the loop is like one of the most beautiful drives in
Oh,
the
really?
United States. Yeah.
That's the consensus. All right, cool. So you're talking about blooming flowers. Yeah, we saw a lot out in your property, but you also have a lot of houseplants. How many houseplants do you have?
Not enough.
Oh, that is the official answer.
That's the
then.
official
Okay.
answer. Yeah, my
Thought you were
husband
gonna
has
be
a
specific.
different view on this. So different opinions, but clearly not enough. I don't even know. I haven't counted them recently. I bet that there's 200 houseplants.
Oh my gosh, I was gonna say
And
30.
30. Oh my gosh. In this room, there's 30. And I put them in every single room. And then right now I have all my garden starts ready too. So that's probably like another 150 plants. So technically in the house right now, we could be approaching 400.
Would you say you identify as a plant person?
They're okay.
All right, we'll stay on that track. Do you remember a first plant that you remember having a relationship with as a kid?
I do have this memory of living in, I lived in St. George, Utah at the time. And my dad and I went on, it was probably like, I mean, I'm pretty young here, so I'm maybe 8. And we went on some kind of like naturalist trip in a snow canyon area. And the guide for the trip pointed out Mormon tea, which is a relationship to ephedra, and sometimes called Brigham Young tea. And it's just this like very, simple looking plant. I don't know. Do you know Brigham Young tea?
Yeah, I've seen pictures of it. I can't say I've ever seen it in person. I want to say when I first started working at Mountain Rose Herbs, they sold, I don't know if it was Mormon tea, but I'm pretty sure it was ephedra. But yeah.
Yeah,
so
so
I have some.
it's an interesting looking plant. And I remember, the guide telling us like, oh, you can break off a bit and chew it, and how that it was used as a tea. And I actually have a horrible memory. I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I remember that. And I remember it was like mind blown. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I did break off a bit and chew it. It didn't taste good, but I like, even as a kid was like, this is the coolest thing. And I remember whenever I like was with that plants with friends, I'd be all like, oh, well, let me tell you about this plant. So yeah, I remember
you're
that
kind of herbalist early on.
Well, that was the kind of an isolated
Right, sure.
incident, honestly, like that didn't, I remember other
seedling.
things, like we went to see a super bloom in, it's escaping the famous desert in Nevada, Death Valley.
Oh, okay.
And we went and saw super bloom. And I remember buying a coloring book there, and like I just loved that coloring book, and I loved the flowers. And so I remember like little things like that. Later, like in my teenage years, I was really interested in natural health, like in ways that like most teenagers are not. Like I remember going to the library and getting a book like on vitamins for dummies. Like, those yellow books.
Totally,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
got that, and then I like made flashcards. So I remember like what vitamin A is like for in the body and stuff. And I was actually just telling you that when I got my driver's license, I was super excited to go to the health food store like by myself. And so I was very interested in natural health from a very young age. But it really wasn't until later that kind of like that general idea of like natural health merged into actual plants.
Okay. Yeah, I could see like the thread looking back. How
Yeah,
like,
that's
you're
how
making
it is,
you're making
yeah.
flashcards and stuff. It totally seems like a Rosalie thing. And,
Yeah.
So how did that kind of transition you into your study of herbalism like properly?
Well, so there was like, again, a couple of threads in
sure.
college. I like to say I minored in activism, and I worked on a lot of like indigenous rights versus big oil campaigns. And I was pretty like righteous and angry, that like I had this idea like, oh, if people just knew that their clothes came from the sweatshop, they wouldn't buy them anymore. Right. And so I would stand outside a Gap and hand out like flyers about, the horrible things that were going on. And I would, did a lot of like, it was in Portland, Oregon, did a lot of like street actions and civil disobedience and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, I got kind of disheartened because apparently yelling at people is not a super great way to like convince them that like they might want to change their ways. And like nobody going into Gap wanted my unsolicited flyer. So I kind of grew like disillusioned with that, which I always like to say that, direct actions and civil disobedience definitely have a time and place. It was just like for that time in my life and the way I was doing it, it was just kind of burnt out and became cynical and that sort of thing. And then I, like long story short, found myself at a wilderness school and like kind of a They call it primitive living skills with earth-centered living skills. And so we're doing things like going out into the forest and learning how to find and purify water and build shelter and foods and all that kind of stuff. So I did that and was an apprentice at that school for a couple years. And one of the teachers, Karen Sherwood, ethnobotanist, plant person, and I became really drawn to that. And it was all field study. So it wasn't learning about plants in books.
Right.
It was out in the field. We were harvesting, tending, making food, making medicine, making baskets, making tools. And it was like a whole new world had opened up to me. Like I really look at that as like, there was like before Rosalee and after Rosalee. And that was a huge shifting point in my life that I just began to see the whole world entirely differently.
Is that where you met Xavier too?
Yeah. Like I studied there for a couple years, and he was studying at another school for a couple years. But I ended up being admin for that school, and he came to study at that school, and we ended up carpooling just by like.
You were like, ooh la la.
Oh, immediately. Yeah, yeah. I tell him I fell in love with him at first sight. He was wearing wool, which like in that world, it's like wool is really cool, and like Gore-Tex not cool. So he was wearing wool, and I was like, that guy knows. And he was French,
Right.
And I had been obsessed with France, like pretty much, my whole, like since I was 14, really.
Totally.
So I was kind of like, oh, he's a tracker, he's French. I was like, thank you.
Yeah, I want to get kind of back to the history of Rosalie and how you got into herbalism and all that. I'm kind of curious what your fascination with France is, and do you think there's kind of an overlap to that in, like, say, natural living, or for me personally, I know we've talked about this before. My favorite city, or one of them, is New Orleans, and there's a strong French undertone there. But I'm just curious, like, how does that infuse into your daily life, and what is your fascination with France overall?
Well, I started taking French when I was a teenager. I think because my dad wanted me to take Spanish. So you know how it is.
Yeah, sure.
So I started taking.
I'll take French.
Yeah, I'll take French. I now speak both languages, but definitely started with the French. And I went to France on a school trip when I was like 16, and I remember just arriving there and feeling like, oh, I'm home. Yeah. Oh, this is actually bringing it back to the plants. So I'm there, I'm 16, I'm on this trip, and it was like a 10-day whirlwind school trip, where we go to all these places.
Sure.
But I just felt like I am home. This place was so cool on so many different levels. And I did not want to come home. Not like, oh man, it sucks, I'm going home now. Yeah. Like I was like 100% like I did not. And I just, towards the end of the trip, I was like seriously thinking like, how can I figure this out? And I had this plan. Everybody would walk on the plane. I'd be the last one. And I'd just turn around at the last moment and like walk back. Yeah. And our tour guide had told us that in France has a flower rating system for each town. And so you can be like a 4-flower town or a 5-flower town. So I was like, they need people to plant flowers. So I'll just get a job. I'll be like immigrant labeler planting. I was dead serious. Wow. Like I was just like, and when I got home, the only time I've ever been really depressed in my entire life was like 2 months after that trip.
You were just missing it.
Missing it, yeah, for whatever reason.
Is that flower scale on a scale like, say, 1 to 10?
I can't remember what the flower scale is.
That's cool that they even have that.
Yeah.
Wow. So going back to your herbal stuff, who would you say were some of your early herbal mentors?
Well, so, I learned like ethnobotany and field stuff and, botany itself with Karen. Yeah. And while I was studying at that school, I came down with a really weird set of symptoms, which is look at another long story short, but I ended up having, being diagnosed, like I was totally like bedridden and, could barely make it to the bathroom by myself and stuff. And, I ended up being diagnosed with a very rare autoimmune disease. And I was in Seattle at the time, and I had a whole team of specialists working first to diagnose me. And then once they got the diagnosis, this is how it went. They said, you have a rare autoimmune disease. There is no cure. We can give you high-dose steroids, which will work temporarily, but not in the long term. Wow. And you will have a slowly declining quality of life, and your life expectancy will be around 40. And here, they gave me a brochure. Yeah, they were just like, we don't know anything really about this disease because it's so rare. Yeah. And they gave me a brochure, and they gave me like a Yahoo group, like those old Yahoo group kind of things. Yeah. And they were like, you can find some information here. Wow. And that was that, which I would honestly, like, there was 2 days there that was really intense for me. And the whole like, why me? And, just disbelief and all that kind of stuff. But because Western medicine had just like shut the door I was like, it took about 2 days for me to be like, okay, what else is out there for
Sounds
me?
like survival. Like, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
like what
do
else?
something.
And at this
Yeah.
point, like I'd always been interested in natural health, but it was like a hobby.
Sure.
It was like, oh, you have a bruise, what can you put on there? You know, like
Mm-hmm.
really kind of like boo-boo things or whatever, you know. So, yeah, so I dove into that world. Didn't have very much money at all. And so I started going to student clinics like that Bastille there and stuff. So I went to all these like free clinics and stuff trying to like gather information. And what was so interesting to me is everybody I went to, I'd be like, I have Still's disease. Dun, dun, dun. And they were just like, meh. Like, who are you?
Right.
What is your life?
Yeah.
You know, this kind of stuff. And
Sure.
at first it was frustrating. I was like, did you not hear me?
Right.
I have a rare autoimmune disease that's going to kill me.
Right.
But then, you know, but really no one reacted to that. It really was like, and so it was this whole like paradigm shift for me too. And so I did 6 months of working with people. I was a very healthy vegetarian at the time, which means I ate like gluten and soy and some like veggies on the side.
Yep.
And so had to like clean that up a bit and have a more nutrient dense diet. And, I think vitamin D deficiency was huge. But anyway, so I saw a Chinese herbalist and I drank the most horrible potions I've ever drank in my life. Yeah. I do it over the sink because sometimes it didn't stay down. Yeah, it was not good. But after 6 months, I was symptom free.
Wow.
And that was a huge paradigm shift because Western medicine is supposed to know the shit, right?
Yeah.
And they did not have answers for me. And I went back to my doctor. You know, it's like I'm 23, right? I know everything in the world there is to know about everything as like 23-year-olds can do. And I went back to the doctor because I thought she'd really want to know. Like, by the way, I cured
Just
my
like those people at the
autoimmune
Gap
disease.
store.
Yeah, I totally thought. And she just looked at me and she said, there's just no scientific evidence that what you eat would affect your immune system in that way. And I was just like, but look at me. And she said, maybe you're misdiagnosed, which is just kind of absurd because I had all the symptoms and I was in the hospital and everything, you know, it's just, yeah. So that like at that moment of like getting better and then just thinking about how all these people, whether they have a rare autoimmune disease or not, just made me think like there's a lot of people who've been told like, this is it for you. This is the end of the road. And who might not see natural health, holistic health as an option. And I was like, I'm going to help those people find this route. And because I was in love with the plants, that was that like natural. So with Karen, I learned a lot of like wild food harvesting tools and stuff. And then after that's like when I became, you know, more interested specifically in herbalism and medicine through plants.
Yeah, I feel like that kind of catapulted you into wanting to share this with the rest of the world, and now you do such an amazing job with it. Would you almost say that this might be your like mission in life to help people fall in love with the plants and have them help them with their health?
Yes and no. In that, I would say like early on, that was very much like that was the thing, you know, just like holistic health, helping people find answers especially when they've been told like all we can do is manage your disease and that sort of thing. But there was this other thing that happened to me with the Wilderness Awareness School that I was talking about, like that before Rosalee, after Rosalee. And I went from like pretty much being raised in small cities, but cities nonetheless my whole life. When I first started studying plants, it was that like wall of green. So I didn't know plants at all. Like on my first herb class day, I learned what plantain was. And I thought that was really cool. I remember that. So I really didn't know the plants, and that like process of learning the plants and the ecosystems and all of the interactions of the many beings there, and then the role that I and other humans can potentially play in terms of tending that and forming those connections. That was ultimately like the biggest thing for me. And I became a little disillusioned in my own clinical practice because, like, long story short, I went to 8 years of school and had a clinical practice, and I loved being a clinician. But at that time, I wasn't able to like bridge that gap. Like, I felt like I was recommending turmeric to people, and they were getting great results, but it wasn't like that deeper thing, you know, that deep connection to the earth, which ultimately, you know, yelling at people in the front of the gap doesn't do anything, but connecting people back to place is a powerful transformation, and I think what we desperately need. And it's a joyful thing, you know, it's not like a yelling, angry thing, it's a joyful thing. And now I have the privilege of watching my students go through that transformation, and brings tears to my eyes every time, and just like watching people's lives and views expand and have that deep sense of connection. Sometimes it's strengthening a connection they already had, sometimes it's like sparking something totally new. It's just that, so that's kind of like, that's my mission now. And I think that herbs are such a wonderful, there's so many entryways into connection to the land, but herbs are such a wonderful way, because when we rely on them for medicine, that is a powerful connection. It's like when I walk outside and I go visit the elderberries in the fall, and know like this is the medicine that keeps me well in the winter. And that's a profound interactive experience, not just to like, that's pretty.
Yeah. Well, you and I both do a lot of, say, online herbal education. I think there's definitely a place for that. And I probably go on the soapbox almost every single episode now, but I do think it's incredibly important for folks to get out there and probably learn from an in-person teacher, say at an event or a local apprenticeship, that kind of thing, and build on your foundation that way. So yeah, I had the same experience at the Columbine School. There was that wall of green, and then you start learning individual species, and then you go out in the woods and you feel like you have a relationship with these plants, and then over the seasons you see them over and over again through their cycles, and then it just becomes like this magical experience. So
Yes, absolutely. That's it.
yeah, so
I have a hard time explaining it.
yeah, I think you did a beautiful job just there.
I just feel it can be so profound,
Yeah.
so magical,
Yeah.
so wonder filled, and
Yeah.
so just like what life is about,
Yeah.
like deep love,
Yeah.
really. And so it is hard to explain it, but when people tap into it and feel it, that's all that we need,
Especially coming out of, like, say, the slumber of the winter, which we are right now, getting back out there, you're like, oh yeah, this is right. This is what like real life can be like. I forgot about this. So especially, being behind the computer screen so much. But so after wilderness school, what was, like, say, your first herbal apprenticeship that you took?
My first official one was East West School of Herbology in California. I did their 4-year program.
Yeah.
And then I also studied extensively with Paul Bergner.
Shout out, Paul.
I did a lot of long distance with Paul, and then spent some time with him in the rainforest in Oregon, actually. But major influence on me. I had his, all of his CD sets and stuff, and I would just I've listened to all of those 5 times probably. Yeah. Well, and so then I did a mentorship with Carter Perdix in Tulsa for years, but I also did a lot of study with him in person in class, and I would drive from where I live now to Seattle, which is a 4-hour drive. So I'd listen to Paul the whole way there, go, to 2 or 3 full days of class with KP, then drive home listening to Paul. So I do have an obsessive personality.
I love it. Well, I don't know if you consider Jim McDonald per se a teacher of yours, but I'm sure he's been a huge influence on some of your herbalism. Would you say that's true?
Huge influence.
Yeah. So I don't want to speak for you, but he did supply a question for the interview today, so I'm going to play that for you now.
Okay, knowing Jim, I'm a little worried.
Yeah.
In a good
It's
way.
pretty vulgar. No.
Hi, Rosalee.
Hi, Jim.
So, question. Vampires. Do you think if you treated their blood deficiency that they wouldn't need to bite people anymore? Or do you think if you or me or another person were to use blood-building tonics like beets or Romania, if they bit us, they wouldn't need as much blood? I'm just interested in your thoughts. Bye.
The way that Jim's mind works, I can just see him laying in bed at night thinking, he probably really considers this.
Yeah, totally.
I mentioned I have an obsessive personality. So when I was 14, I was really obsessed with vampires. This is before it was cool.
And does he know this inside?
I don't know that he knows that. But I was legit. Yeah, everything in my life was vampires. Actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my sophomore.
Amanda likes the Twilight series.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, this was before all of that.
Okay. Oh, okay.
My sophomore English teacher refused any more books about vampires. She wouldn't take any more book reports with me if it was a vampire book. She put her foot down. And then she gave me Outlander, which has plants as medicine. Not a great source of information, but plants as medicine in Outlander.
Garlic.
So Jim's question.
Yeah.
It's an interesting idea, that blood building for vampires. I wonder if that would treat the underlying condition, but maybe in exchange they might miss out on eternal life.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So that could be maybe some people, some vampires would be ready for that. 'Cause
Sure.
that is a common theme within vampire stuff is after a couple of thousand years, there becomes a little bit of like discontent.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're plant people though, because I think I could use a couple thousand years
Right.
spending time with the plants,
Totally.
all over the world and everything. So maybe that's the ultimate cure for vampire boredom is.
So you're
spending time
saying
with plants.
vampires start to get bored of being alive, so
Yeah.
they're ready to go.
Yeah.
All right, Jim. There, you heard it. All right.
I was concerned about the second part of the
Yeah.
question though, because Jim's saying
Yeah.
if we take blood builders, will vampires need less blood from us? I'm just kind of curious what's going on for Jim in his life right now.
Yeah. So Jim, leave a comment in the YouTube video to this interview with your thoughts. We'd love to know what you think. So awesome. Well, sweet. I've always wanted to hear the story of you going to the Northwest Herb Fair and meeting John Gallagher and kind of how that evolved and like kind of transitioned to your next phase of your herbalist life.
That's funny that you reference that. I actually met John previously at another fair.
Oh.
I met him the same day I met Xavier, my handsome French
Oh,
husband.
I don't know if I knew that. Okay.
Yeah, so we met at a Derek Jensen event. Derek Jensen is an author.
Okay.
He wrote many books, including Language Older Than Words. So we were at an event where he was speaking. It was like an Earth Day event. And I was tabling for that school that I was working for. And Xavier came up to me and started talking, and I recognized the accent. And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "France." And I said, "Oh, je parle français." And he says, "I don't speak French with Americans." So anyway, love at first sight, like I was saying. And that same day I met John Gallagher, and he came up to the table too because he knew Karen. And, he's like, just said hi. He was just being very extroverted and just said hi. And because I'd never met him before. And I knew of him because he worked on the Kamana training program and was a big thing at Wilderness Awareness School. So I was like meeting a star, like, oh, John Gallagher just introduced himself to me.
He was a star all those years ago too.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So, so I met him there and just, that kind of brief interaction. And then, we were at the Northwest Herbal Fair in the summertime, and we had booths again next to each other. And then a propane tank exploded. Like big explosion,
Oh,
big
wow.
loud noise, kind of like everyone running
my
kind of
gosh.
situation. And so we found ourselves like together, like
Wow.
kind of watching the flames and everything
Oh my gosh.
from a distance. And we just started chatting, and he said that him and his wife Kimberly were renting out their basement, and I was in Seattle at the time and ready to leave Seattle in the big city, and they were renting their basement for half the price of what I was paying for. And I said, sure, I'll take it. Just like that. Their kids were very young then. Haley was
Wow.
like 15 months old, and she's in college now. So
And
a
then-
while ago.
Were you working on projects with him at that point, or?
No, but I started to almost immediately.
Wow.
So back then, he had the blog and everything, and he asked if I wanted to do a recipe article for the blog, and so I made rose hip syrup, and I
Wow.
had like this old digital camera,
Yeah.
and I took pictures with that, and did the whole like step-by-step thing.
Sure.
And with John, it just like kind of grew over time. Like he kept asking, like, "Do you want to do this?" And yeah. "Do you want to do this?"
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just kept growing from there.
That's super cool. Did you both publish the book together, Alchemy of Herbs, if I'm remembering correctly? Was that a project between the two of you, or?
Yeah, like he did, like, so I wrote the book.
Okay.
And he did a lot of the like marketing, and
Okay.
we both worked on the design a lot
Okay.
together.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Well, so John also supplied a question.
My name is John, long-time listener, first-time caller, and I was wondering what would happen if I took all of the plants that you see here in this garden and tinctured them at the same time. Is that a good idea?
Another,
that
is that an
long
inside
pause
joke too?
there.
Or?
No, just his face was so funny and just the long pause.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never like to tell people what they are doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Because what do I know?
Yeah.
you know?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I like to do with that kind of thing? Granted, like all the plants are like safe and everything.
Yeah.
Is to make like a bath tea out of them.
Mm.
It's like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. To do that with like wild plants or your garden plants, then you can kind of like literally steep yourself
Yeah.
in plants, which I love.
Totally.
So I might recommend that for John.
All right.
Yeah.
Good suggestion.
And then there is a type of tincture that you could make that's like is capturing that, like maybe you want to go out on summer solstice or a special day to you or something and harvest a whole bunch of plants, and again, knowing that they're all safe, etc., but harvest those and then tincture them all together, I wouldn't use that as like a, I mean, I never do this anyway, but I wouldn't be like, oh, you have X problem, like here's the tincture for that. But I would use it as like a, like let's say you did that on summer solstice, that can be a wonderful winter remedy. I'm just like, it's capturing that whole essence of what that day was, and the more intention you put into it, the better, and then you can rely on that.
So it's more of like, say, a spiritual type of practice as opposed to a medicinal. You're
certainly getting like, you know, like chemical constituents and all that kind of stuff, but it is bridging those together.
Presuming they're all edible or usable, in that regard. You don't throw like monk's hood in there or something.
Right.
But yeah, I've heard of people doing that as well with, say, like a flower essence and that kind of thing. So you get the medicine of that place. That's a good suggestions. All right, well, there you go, John. Good idea, Rosalie. So speaking of plants, I think it's maybe a good time we go on a little garden tour. You want to go head out?
I would love to go on the garden tour.
Sweet.
Well, I think this is the first filmed garden tour that we've done. I do my own podcast out here in the garden, but this is pretty exciting to be here with you, Mason. I feel like I need to give like we are at the very beginning of the gardening season. So we had snow on the ground weeks ago, like not like many weeks ago, but like a couple weeks ago. So, and it was just a very long, cold spring, and now everything is bursting forth. But the garden is very much in its like infancy stage, and just all the plants are little. But luckily, Mason and Amanda have agreed to make the short trip back from Wisconsin to here in the summertime when you can properly see the garden. So I'm very excited for that, and we have it on record.
100% happening.
Don't edit that out.
Not.
What? You said.
Oh, my bad.
We're going to listen to Tori.
That's right.
I'm really excited to be here in this particular spot because I just noticed this spot yesterday, and like these, I mean, they just come out of nowhere, right? Like the violets popped up, and then with the daffodils, and you can see how fresh it is. Like this is leaves right here that they're poking through. Look at that, cool. Poking that little flower bud.
Popping right through.
Yeah, so very exciting to be in this like very beautiful little, at the base of a cherry tree with flying ants. So I love violets so much, and I actually planted all of this violet from sprouts from Strictly Medicinals and from a friend who had some violet odorata, and I've just been plugging it everywhere, and it's starting to become kind of weedy and go everywhere, which is what I want. I want it to be everywhere because I love violet so much. I actually only fell in love with violet like not too long ago. Like, I don't know, it was maybe 5 years ago, but I hadn't spent much time with violet odorata. Have you?
Not really. It always makes me happy when I see it pop up in the spring.
I mean, the smell. Yeah. You should grab one and smell, because that smell is just like...
The flower's the thing that has the odor. Oh, yeah.
And that's such an incredible smell. And the thing, you can't capture that smell.
No.
Like, that's not something that has ever been able to be captured, which is so special. Wow. It's so special that we can capture lavender smell, right? And I cherish that. Yeah. And it's also so special we can't... This is it. Right. This ephemeral spring being. We get to smell this smell and then... enjoy it for such a short time. Right. And it really is a beautiful reminder of just to be present and to enjoy the spring. And right about now, things are like ramping up really quick in the garden. There's always just so much to do, and it's easy to be like, dun, 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 Yeah. But this is like, let's take some time to be with the violets. Tori Amos actually says to kiss the violets as they're waking up, which I think is a beautiful metaphor for like taking the time to spend time in spring. And so for me, like the violet medicine first and foremost is just what violets do for my heart in the springtime. Just the gladdening, the happiness, like, oh my gosh. And they did just come up so fast. Making medicine and food with violets is so much fun because the aesthetics are just gorgeous. Yeah. So I love to make violet syrup, which does, impart that flavor that's so special. And when you make the violet syrup, depending on your water and what type of water you have, it might be blue when you first make it or pinkish. And then you can add drops of lemon juice and it changes it. Until you get what I like is like the deep purple. And it's just so cool. This deep purple syrup made from these flowers.
And you're saying it does impart some of what we're smelling.
Yeah, it does.
Tastes somewhat like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. And then with that syrup, you could just have that syrup. I'll talk about medicinal virtues in just a moment, but you could just like have that syrup by the spoonful. But what we like to do is we make violet gelato.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is really fun. Or we make violets. I make a Kiss the Violets, Tory reference, cocktail or mocktail.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really fun. Then, of course, you can use the flowers to adorn salads and cakes and all sorts of things like that as well. So there's like really endless possibilities to how to enjoy violets. So even that, like the medicine, even if it had no medicinal virtues, just making the syrup and then enjoying that, also medicine, because it's just such a, again, ephemeral plant, that's the word, ephemeral plant that that you really have to harvest yourself. And sometimes Chinese medicine apothecaries will carry the leaves and stuff, but often not super great quality. So really this is a plant that you need to get to know, to harvest yourself. In many places it does grow weedy. Definitely look for that smell. There's lots of different violets out there, but when it comes to this type of medicine, I love the odoratum. There's a lot of wild violets out there, and I don't recommend harvesting wild violets unless you are very connected to place and you know the status of, some violets are kind of less hard, less populous, and you could come across like one patch that's like big and beautiful, but that might be the only patch for many miles. And so it's not just a plant that you want to find like one good stand, but you really want to be in touch with like, what is the status of this plant in this region? Is it at risk, etc. So it's nice to have these like weedy varieties in our lawns and stuff where we can enjoy them and harvest them and not have to worry about having any kind of negative impact in that regard. Yeah, so medicinal gifts of violet is, energetically they're so cooling and soothing, and that is like a great indication for their medicine. So like whenever you have hot, dry conditions, violet's there to help you. That can be a hot, dry cough, hot, dry skin, just any type of heat and dryness in that sense. Jim McDonald, who we mentioned, and he talks about violet being so great for like rigidity and anger, and how there's a softening to violet, like, just a softening in our personalities even as well. Violet can really modulate inflammation, especially inflammation due to dryness. So used pretty famously for things like the dry eczema, dry skin conditions as well.
Are you referring to the aerial parts tinctured or tea or both?
So I love to work with the violet flowers, and the violet leaves are fantastic as well, and they persist much longer.
Okay,
and so these are also, like if you give them a little nibble on the leaves, they have a demulcent quality to them as well as the, I can just immediately feel that.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of violets
Slimy.
are very similar, but some of them are more, especially the roots can have other constituents that can be like nausea inducing. So really good to know like what your native species is, and again, harvest with care. But yeah, the slimy on that.
Yep.
But on a hot summer's day, like adding some violet leaves to a salad. I don't like it as the only salad green, but a little bit of salad green is good. It makes a really great nourishing infusion. Violets. But again, it's like you kind of have to harvest it yourself and dry it. You can dry the flowers kind of, sort of, like technically you can, but they, like this one is kind of spent. And like when they actually fully dry, they just become like these like curled up little tiny pieces of themselves. So better to make medicine with these fresh. So I love the syrup. I love the tea. People do work with it as a tincture. I'm not really a tincture person. So especially for something that's cooling and moistening, you can get some of those properties into a tincture, but alcohol is so drying and warming that it's, if like you really want the cool, soothing medicine of violet, then a tea or syrup is going to be better. Also, I love to infuse this into oil with dandelion as like a lymphatic massage oil as well. So it does make a lovely oil in that regard. Did I mention we make a gelato out of it?
Is it blue?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And you could add like, it makes like bluish, but you could add something like butterfly pea flower.
Oh, okay. Make it
just
really
to like,
make it pop.
Yeah, really make it pop. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very impressed with how slimy the leaves were. I know I've had it. It's been a long time since I've violet leaf. I'm a huge marshmallow root infusion fan. I would love to try harvesting and drying some someday and trying the infusion out of the leaves. I suspect it'll be quite slimy, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a wonderful thing. Maybe we could talk about lawns in a little bit, but
Sure.
I'm all about not having a monoculture grass lawn, and it's a great thing to get established in your lawn. It can be a little tricky, like I've had trouble getting it in our lawn just because like if you already have like thick matted grass, then it can be a little bit more difficult, but with a little bit of urging you can get it spreading, and I know you all can't see here, but there's probably like 15 different violet flowers which are spreading exuberantly, and I hope they continue to spread because you just really can't have enough violets around.
Yeah, this has been smelling that again. It is reminiscent. You know how like the memories associated to smell and everything. I'm like, oh yeah, for sure, I remember this one. Smell-o-vision, but
yeah, I don't even know how to explain that smell.
It's like kind of sweet floral. It's lovely.
Yeah. Oh, people make like jams and jellies out of violet stuff.
Okay.
Oh, vinegar. Violet vinegar is quite nice, and you can make that into like a shrub or a drink or. Our book, Emily and mine's book, Wild Remedies, we have lots of violet recipes in there. Some of those Emily created, like the cocktails and mocktails and stuff. They're quite inventive. So those are in there. And yeah, love violets. And I'm just, I know you'll be back for the summer visit when everything's blooming, but this is like a special thing to have time with these violets since they're here for such a short period of time.
Yay.
They're also super nutritious. They're like filled with all sorts of lovely things, especially like rutin and just wonderful heart health too. Like these are great, like nourishing for the heart.
One of my favorite things about the herbal community is we just love the common, weedy, everyday plants. And I feel like this one, even though it is that, I feel like it's still underappreciated perhaps. But I definitely want to start utilizing this more, spending more time with the violet now.
Mason said I had to talk about dandelion. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's true.
You'd like casually drop that like 3 times, so I was like quick to pick up the hint.
Yeah, I want to hear what you have to say about one of my favorite plants.
I know. I love that this is one of your favorite plants because it's one of my favorite plants on so many different levels. Dandelions. You know what I don't get, Mason? So one of my very favorite times of year is when the lawn bursts into dandelion flower. We're kind of right on the precipice of this right now. And like as far as the eye can see, we can kind of see it from our view here, like past the camera and stuff. There's just dandelions everywhere. It's like these little nuggets of gold, like that fill the lawn. Yeah. And there's bees and beetles and spiders and ladybugs and all of these different beings so thrilled that the dandelion is here. And it's so beautiful. And people literally poison the earth and their own water tables in order to prevent this beauty from happening. Like, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, it's fucked up.
It really is. Like, it just, like, I know we all know that, but, like, if I start to think about it even a little bit, I'm just like, I don't get it. I really don't get it.
Can I share a quick story with you?
Please do.
We were just staying in an RV park. I won't say where or anything like that, but this person was using Roundup, spraying weeds on their tiny little, gravelly proper area essentially, and it just seems so bizarre to me. I'm like, they're temporarily staying there and they decided to pull out Roundup and start spraying these dandelions, and they don't even live there, you know what I mean? It was the most bizarre experience. I debated like talking to them or something. Like, I was deeply offended by it. It was anyways, I just wanted to share that.
I think there's something to be said for saying something. Like, as I've learned, yelling at people doesn't work. Like, I definitely have that, I know. But, talking to people on a personal level, maybe even not strangers, even like our neighbors, to express, like, sometimes like they aren't ready to love dandelion the way that we are yet. We'll get there. But it's well known that Roundup causes problems. It's banned in Europe. And to talk about things, like a sibling or a friend or, a family member who's gotten cancer. And, it's like literally you're not supposed to use this around like children and animals. And, even to talk about that, like some people really love their dogs or whatever, and to talk about like, let's make this place safe for us all. Sometimes that, especially if we talk about like shared values and not like, I'm going to tell you, everything you need to know and like finger wagging. Again, I know this because I have done this like ad nauseum. But I do think that it's not hard. Like once people have that, like, because I think that a lot of it's autopilot. Like they just think that they're supposed to spray Roundup or whatever, it's autopilot. Once we interrupt that, I don't think it's that hard to love dandelions because again, like this is so beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And then of course the dandelion has so many gifts that it offers us, which we could be here 2 hours talking about dandelion gifts. I definitely think that these flowers, they bring joy to the heart, just by looking at them, but also working with them is quite joyful. I used to make a lot of dandelion flower mead, and one year I got my husband involved in the harvesting of it, of which he was not entirely thrilled because it takes a lot. Sure. Yeah, it's kind of tedious and it takes a lot of work. But he helped me, and after a while, like we just started like laughing and having a great time. And I really do feel like that's just like the magic of dandelion. Like it just starts to infuse, that like pollen gets over your fingers, and it just is a really happy experience. And it does make really great mead and makes great jelly, makes great fritters, makes great petals to sprinkle on salad, really high in lutein, which is wonderful for the eyes. And just wonderful nutrients as well as bringing the joy. There's a lot of dandelion lookalikes, and one way to know for sure, one of many ways which we'll go over, is that dandelions, there's one flower for one stalk. So some dandelion lookalikes have like multiple flowers coming off the stalk. One flower, one stalk, and it's a hollow stalk. And sometimes it exudes a milk sap on it. There it goes. Sometimes, all the time. So that could be another way. With the dandelion flower, there's the yellow petals, aster family with ray and disc flowers. Then underneath it are these like bracts, which can be kind of bitter. And so I use my thumbnail to just kind of separate those two. So there's that bottom, the top. You can also separate the green parts here. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. One trick in working with dandelion flowers is that you have to wait for the sun to come out because they bloom with the sun, and they will close kind of later on in the day. But you have to harvest them and use them. If you harvest them and put them in a bag and put them in your fridge, they just become puff balls or they close up. So it's really like, now is the time. Like, I have the time to use them. I'm going to use them right now, is how you want to do that. I would say, though, probably the flowers are I don't use the flowers as much as other wonderful plant parts, like the leaves. This is a wonderful toothed leaf. Dandelion comes in a lot of shape and sizes, and sometimes people think that they can identify dandelion by the leaves. That's not a great indication for people if you're just starting out, because there's still a lot of leaves that look like dandelion. This has a lovely tooth appearance. Another thing about identifying dandelions, it has a smooth vein on the backside. If there's prickles there, if it's fuzzy there, then that's not dandelion. Something really smooth. I love the leaves. In French, we call the leaves pissenlit, which sounds so beautiful. It means piss in the bed, which you will do. Hopefully not in the bed, but it's definitely a diuretic with the leaves. And one time I experienced that in a way I'll never forget it. I made dandelion pesto, which is one of my favorite ways to enjoy the plant as well as to convert others to enjoying the plant. So both of those are true. And so I made dandelion pesto, and I was at a friend's house, and I was sleeping in a loft with a ladder. It was kind of like a rickety ladder, and so it was like my 5th time down that ladder in one night. And I was like, oh, it was a dandelion. What was I thinking? So it does work really well for that. And then just super nutritious. And I love that these, some of our first spring greens, they have so much calcium, phosphorus, manganese, potassium. It's like pretty much all of those. It's in there, and a wonderful way to enjoy the plant. And this early spring, when these are young leaves like this, they're pretty good. They might have a slight bitter taste to them, but it's kind of like a good, kind of bites back a little bit. When they become like a lion, thank you. when they become super old and like leathery feeling, sometimes that bitter taste is more challenging. So, and not really like something that my body is like, oh, please give me more of that, in the way the spring greens are. You know, my new favorite thing to do, which I hope I have time today to do for you and Amanda, is make dandelion greens hummus.
Oh, wow.
Which is essentially adding dandelion greens to a hummus recipe. It makes it green, and then just kind of gives it, you know, this different dandelion flavor.
Sure.
You decorate it with the flowers and pansies and violets, all these spring things. I hope I really have time to make that now.
We could pick the leaves for you if you want.
Sweet, yeah. So yeah, wonderful food, wonderful medicine. And then there are the roots deep below the earth. This long taproot that reaches into the earth and pulls up all sorts of nutrients. And that can also be wonderful medicine for the liver. And my favorite thing, like many people though, is to chop it up and roast it and make it into a dandelion beverage. And that is absolutely medicine. We drink that all the time, just as like dandelion love, you know, liver support and all of those nutrients. You can eat the root too. It's sweeter in the fall, and sometimes people say like in the fall it's better for food, and in spring it's used up the inulin, which I should talk about. It's used up the inulin, and it has less sweetness to it and is more bitter, and so that might be a better time for medicine. Inulin is really high in the leaves and in the roots, and people get pretty excited about taking expensive probiotics for like healthy gut flora. But really, continuing, it's kind of like emerging research, but it's really showing that what makes a bigger impact on your gut flora is eating fiber and eating things like inulin, which is a prebiotic. And so leaves and roots have inulin in them, so great
Did not
way.
know the leaves had the inulin as well. That's good to know.
So yeah, wonderful way to support healthy gut bacteria too. Yeah, what did I leave out?
I don't know. I really liked how you went from basically the flower, stem, leaf to the root. I thought that was really nice. You also were able to flex your botany skills. I liked how you talked about the various parts.
I forgot to mention that the basil rosette is with the leaves. Because again, like some plants will have like a stem and then multiple leaves off the stem, but all of these come from a central point in the ground. So that's another identifying feature. Oh, and look, now I see what I didn't talk about is dandelion buds.
Oh, yeah.
I love the buds. You can just harvest these like this, and again, take off those like bottom parts that can be kind of bitter. And you can just add these to salads and that sort of thing and just eat the dandelion bud. I also like to ferment them with radishes. It's just like a lactoferment or a sauerkraut ferment. And that's pretty good too.
Our mutual friend Aaron one time showed me a recipe. I don't remember, it's been years now, but it was some sort of pickled dandelion buds, and there was like tamari and ginger and honey in there and stuff like that. It was actually really good. I want to do that this year if we can, but
yeah. But we really could spend a long time, and there's just so many benefits to dandelion.
Yeah, I guess my personal story is I always call it my gateway herb, and I know it probably is a lot of people's gateway herb, but I remember it was growing in my front lawn when I was in college, and someone told me that you could eat the leaves, and it just kind of blew my mind, and I was super stoked about that, and ever since then it's kind of become my symbol of getting into herbalism and stuff like that. So, but yeah, before that, I was just reflecting when you were talking about the blowing the seeds and stuff like that. I remember as a kid, I would purposely blow the seeds around to try to spread them. And it's just funny looking back now. I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense to me. But
you're already tending this plant.
Kind of was, yeah, in a way, without knowing it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like to say that, like, if that dandelion brings joy with the flowers, and if that's not enough for you, then you can just blow the seeds and make wishes. Like a plant that gives free wishes is a plant that we can love all the time.
That's right.
But I think that there is a powerful action to be had for like the simple thing of helping our neighbors to love dandelion too, because it's something like, I don't want to get this wrong, but I want to say it's like 80 billion tons of Roundup gets sprayed by homeowners or renters and people at RV parks. So it's like, that's a huge impact that goes into our waterways. It affects our birds, our insects, and our well-being as well. So I think there's like a tremendous impact. at one point we thought, spraying DDT was a good idea.
Yeah, right.
And now we know it's not. And, it took silent spraying and a lot of other people's work around that. And I feel like there's really a lot of potential for a grassroots movement. And again, not to yell at people and make them feel wrong, even though it's very tempting even for me, but that kind of bringing people in and having that shared values of wanting to live a happy, healthy life and wanting the same for our children and our animals. And so I think there's a really strong action around that, which not only our neighbors, but like in Seattle, there's pesticide-free parks, and it can be a matter of like talking to businesses and parks and, on that town level too. Yeah. And a lot of places get sprayed. Again, like, look at how beautiful this is. Yeah. Ooh, one of my favorite things last year, so last year, there was the dandelions, they were in flower. There's not one seed head right now. Yeah. Because we're really at the beginning stages. Right. But then, then there's the seed heads. And last year, for a long time, I watched the sparrows and pine siskins come down and eat the dandelion seeds. Wow. Yeah, which was really sweet. I actually learned that from Cascade Anderson Geller. I didn't know that we could really eat the seeds. But she taught me that, and then watching the birds. You just kind of come along into all these little flowers, or seed heads, dandelion seed heads, and just eat them. And
are you saying humans are able to eat the seed heads too?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh,
they take a lot of work. Like, you could just like take the heads off, like, pew, and then just kind of chomp on the seeds like that. But you could also like harvest a bunch of the seeds and put them in a paper bag, and like the fluff will like come off, and then you can kind of winnow it down. It's, they are high in protein, but they're pretty small. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of something to do like for fun.
Yeah, I want to do it just for the energetic aspect. Yeah. I want to give it a shot.
Yeah. So much joy in the dandelion. That's right. Yeah. And certainly that there's just such a powerful symbol coming up through sidewalk cracks and just reminding us that even cement isn't forever, and the plants are going to overcome, and and bringing us joy in sidewalk cracks too.
Amen.
Well, I thought, since we talked about dandelions and lawns, that I would share this experiment that we're doing, which is the yarrow lawn. So where I live, it's super dry and there's not a lot of water. And when we bought this place, it's this huge lawn, and we're trying to use less and less water. But I like soft ground to walk on too, so it's like figuring out what to do about that. And a lot of they're rewilding your lawn is kind of like something that's grown in popularity. Yeah. But a lot of those rewilding lawn stuff, like I see a lot of it come out of the UK, and it's like they're using very plants that really still need water. Like I've seen clovers and self-heals and violets and etc. That just doesn't work here as a lawn that needs very little water. So we're doing a yarrow lawn. And this has been a big project that especially my husband has been working on. I should not take full credit. So he took this big section of the lawn, and first he dug up all the sod and all the grass, and then he seeded in pounds and pounds of yarrow. Wow. And then he had to meticulously water it for a very long time. It took a while to germinate and get started. And this year was kind of the year of is it going to work? And it is coming in really beautifully. And so the idea is that we'll have this soft lawn that we can walk on and enjoy. That has other, we have plenty of dandelions growing in here. We do have some clover. We have mullein. So there's lots going on there. But then we'll have the yarrow, and we'll keep it mowed. So we aren't going to have a meadow. Because this is this is a space that we use a lot in terms of having picnics and that sort of thing. So we want the lawn, so we'll keep it mowed, but it's just so beautiful. I don't know if you can come down with me, but little patch of it here. And now I get to boast that, how many yarrow plants do you think are here? 20,000? Yeah. So quite the yarrow, but it's kind of an ongoing experiment, and haven't really shared it much with folks because we're just waiting to see if it's going to work. But if it does work really well and it gets established and ideally takes very little water, then we're going to implement that in other parts of the lawn as well.
So the way you came about this was the whole rewilding the lawn situation. You're all of these other plants they desire a lot of water, whereas yarrow doesn't. Did you all think of this? Was this one of your ideas to do the yarrow?
It did come into my mind as an idea.
Wow.
But then I like looked into it to be like, you know,
Has anyone else done
yeah,
this?
yeah,
Yarrow lawn,
yeah. So we found more information about that, and yeah, and we still there's like mallow growing, so there's still like different plants in here. But we're hoping the yarrow will be the biggest one because it thrives here. And yarrow is a very popular or common plant around here, and so yeah,
So it's
really
all
hoping
this
for that.
section right
Yeah.
here. Yeah, just looking at it, if you didn't tell me it was a yarrow lawn, I would just think it was a regular lawn.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
When you look really, like right now, all those like little tiny baby yarrow, if you look at them close, they're pretty cute. Those little baby
They're very
yarrow
cute.
leaves and everything. They're just so beautiful.
What a neat idea.
Yeah.
It's a very herbalist thing to do.
Yeah, and then I can talk about yarrow
Sure. Yeah,
maybe when we get back inside.
that sounds good.
All right.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that tour, Rosalie. That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
All right, we're back. We weren't just sitting here the whole time. Okay, so we were talking earlier, pre-interview, about, say, marketing and herbalists. And I was just curious if you could kind of share with us some common pitfalls that you see, say, the herbalists do in their marketing efforts, or if you'd rather go on the tip route, do you have any just kind of general tips for marketing for herbalists? Because you're very good at it.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that so many herbalists shy away from marketing. And that can be for a couple reasons. Like one, because to many people, just the idea of marketing is like sleazy. Or it can be like even just like a fear of like, what does that mean to like promote plants, which is something that so many of us hold sacred. So there's that, of just kind of like fear against sleaziness. There's also just a lot of people just have like money hurdles, you know, like that it can just be difficult for them. And I'm not even placing a judgment on that, just for better or for worse, it can be a hard thing. It can be a hard thing to like put yourself out there. It can be a hard thing to like, I recently advertised a marketing course and I did have some blowback of people feeling like, oh, you're an herbalist when you're of service, but making a living is less important.
Right.
And I agree that being an herbalist is to be of service. That's how I live my life. And I think it's important that we put food on the table and that we have a place, you know, a safe place to live. And I want, if somebody wants to be an herbalist in some capacity as a means to like how they support their family and themselves, I want them to be able to do that, you know? Like I don't want anyone to be like stuck in a cubicle or whatever job that they hate when they really want to be working with plants. And so I think it's important that we just acknowledge that. And in order to succeed, oftentimes like we don't have jobs as herbalists, like we have to be entrepreneurs. And so we have to take the steps to like be successful at that. So there's that issue. The other thing is, so if you look at the herbal industry as it is today, it has grown exponentially in the past couple of decades, and it's $1 billion industry, you know, billions of dollars, which the thing about that is grassroots herbalists, like if we were thinking like, here's a pie chart of like the 8, you know, whatever billions of dollars, grassroots herbalists are like not even, you know, it's like the tiniest little line, right?
Sliver of the pie.
Sliver of the pie. And that is worrisome to me because a lot of times the big portion of the pie are these major corporations who are not concerned about sustainability, ethics, or even the art of herbalism. It's like they've commodified herbs. That's another thing. People think that like, oh, if I am a marketer and I make money as herbs, I'm just going to commodify everything and like take away the special essence. But I'm like, no, we don't do that as grassroots herbalists. So we can be, infuse our love and our connection to the earth and our ethics and responsibilities into everything we do. And I think I want to see us have a bigger piece of that pie, because when somebody becomes newly interested to herbs, I want them to find the grassroots herbalist, right? Because like I was saying earlier, you know, as a clinician, at a point I got kind of like, you know, disenchanted because I was recommending like, you know, here's some turmeric capsules and take that and they got better. But we're missing out on systems thinking and whole system health and truly like the beauty and wonder of herbalism, which is that connection. And so people might get started with herbs because they go to Walmart and they want to try, marshmallow root for their heartburn or something. Like that might be how they get started because that's so easy, but I hope that's not how they end up. Like I hope that grassroots herbalists can really bring them. So I want us to take up more space and become a part of that conversation so that herbalism isn't totally co-opted into this like commodified business, but is more of a transformative experience for everybody involved.
Yeah, I love the way you frame that. Just picturing the pie in my head, I'm like, of course we want the grassroots, the those types of herbalists be taking up a bigger piece of the pie because, why not? And we were just interviewing Sean Croak in Olympia, Washington, and I think his tincture company used to be called Understory Apothecary. I'm like, yeah, I would feel good putting my money towards that. I don't feel like I'm contributing to say like this big capitalistic society when I'm giving him my money. I'm just helping support him and his family and that kind of thing. So yeah, I love the reframing of it. I almost wonder if some people are listening, they're almost making it sound like we're making excuses for making money and contributing to the capitalist society in this way, but really it's like, yeah, we gotta have shelter, we gotta put food on the table and all this other stuff. And I couldn't agree more. I really think that learning the basics of marketing and business and putting yourself out there so you could reach more people is just a good, smart thing, and potentially even good for the earth in a way. But I'm like a slow incremental steps kind of guy. Like I don't think we're gonna fix the world overnight, but I do think that if we keep increasing that sliver of the pie. And giving our money to the herbalists, the smaller scale herbalists, that is a step in the right direction. So,
yeah.
I
think there was a second part. I don't even know if I answered your first question at all. But
you didn't. No. I think you did.
But another
sure.
part of that is like sometimes the marketing that we're aware of is can be like it can be sleazy,
yes.
right? I think of like the used car salesperson or
Cliché,
like mattress sales or whatever.
Right.
Like that feels
right.
Ugh.
Yeah.
What's wonderful about marketing today for the like small entrepreneur is what it really is learning who you are, who your business is, and then how to authentically share that with people who want the services and gifts that you're offering. Yeah. And as herbalists, I think like we get bitten by the herbal bug. Right. We get so excited. Yeah. We take in all this knowledge and information, and then we can easily feel like internalize that and then think like, oh, now everyone's just going to come to me because I'm doing cool shit.
Yeah.
But, and then we think like, oh, if we say like, oh, I'm an herbalist or I sell herbal products or I'm an herbal teacher, that and fully conveys what we do because we know what that means. Yeah. Like if I, tell you I'm an herbal teacher. Right. Oh, okay. Like, you know what that means.
Sure.
But obviously like our ideal audience, the people we want to attract, who are not yet herbalists and don't know what that means. They don't know. So it's really just like bridging that gap. Yeah. It's not about like manipulating people or forcing people or, all of that kind of thing. It's just saying, here's who I am. Here's my gifts. Or again, it might be your company's gifts or whatever. And here's what I have to offer in such a way that the person who's like wanting that in their life can identify and be like, oh, that's what I want. Yeah. And, then engage with that.
100%. Yeah, I feel like Herb Rally started as an extension of basically my interests, which was promoting herbalism and a natural lifestyle. And I do genuinely, for whatever reason, enjoy like the marketing and business aspect of it for whatever reason. And then when Amanda joined Herb Rally too, now I feel like it's kind of an extension of her creativity and stuff like that. So I love how you frame that as far as like your business can be just basically a reflection of your personality being put out there, and that's essentially what you're doing when you're marketing. You're just promoting yourself, maybe in a more systematized way, I guess. But do you have
intentional way?
Intentional. That's a good word for it. Yeah. Any like quick tips on what you would recommend for people do? I was going to think maybe like email marketing or something like that, collecting email addresses. Or do you have any tips for the audience? Or
so for me, the first step is learning how to copyright. That
nice.
Is, before you do anything else, like people often ask me like, what should I post on Facebook or should I get an Instagram account or all of these things? And like those things are like step 5 and 6. Yeah. And oftentimes when people get frustrated with those mediums, which there's a lot of reasons to be frustrated with those mediums, not even saying everyone should do social media by any means, but oftentimes that frustration comes like because they skip to that. Because that's like the visible part of marketing, but there's like all these other invisible parts of the process, and that is really comes down to copywriting and there's books on it and articles and whole courses. I've taken 5. It's not something that I was like blessed with naturally. It's something I've worked hard at, and I think I've gone from like being like pretty bad to like I'm okay now. So
You're good. And actually, we were
I
talking.
really think that though, like I'm okay now. Like I mean, there's people, copywriters who are just like so brilliant, you know, like that's definitely.
John Gallagher is quite good at it, I'd say.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, you said something yesterday about you invested in your education surrounding this. Basically, what Rosalee was saying was it's a good idea to invest in certain classes around this type of stuff because it'll pay off dividends. Would you say that? Or
Yes. So I think I started my first blog in 2008.
Yeah.
And back then, online schools and, you know, product services, that was just kind of like infancy level, maybe adolescent level.
Sure.
And, but I, you know, started off on that, and back then I like bootstrapped everything, you know, like I did read like a ton of free articles and did free trainings and all that kind of stuff. And then as like my business grew, was able to like start investing and taking marketing courses. And I think that has made a huge difference. And I live, like, we can't see my neighbors, right?
Yeah.
Like they're there, but they're kind of like, I live in a valley that has a couple thousand people in it. And when I first got here, I would teach classes and have like 3 people in my classes. Yeah. But that's not a sustainable living, right? And so then I moved that online in order to make a living. And I couldn't have done it without marketing courses. Yeah. And I know like it can take I remember it in myself of just being like, it can be a hard thing to invest in yourself and like make that jump. And like marketing courses cost way more than herbal courses do. So that's also a difficult thing to swallow sometimes. Yeah. But it truly makes a difference. If you find the right course that's like where you're at and has the right message and all that kind of thing, then that's going to pay off very quickly for you. Because there's just no point in like reinventing the wheel. And I like, honestly, I see herbalists out there, I can tell whether or not they've done marketing because oftentimes they're making classic mistakes and just the mistakes we all make because we grew up in a semi same culture, you know, so we're just like making these mistakes that are just like classic. And then you like learn about, you know, you go to marketing class and you're like, here's the 3 things not to do. And that's pretty much what everyone does, you know, left on their own devices. Sure. So there's just no point in like reinventing that, I think. The process of marketing is really like getting to know yourself better and learning how to express yourself better. So it really can be a huge inward process, which can be hard too. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this what we were originally going to talk about this, but you do have a course available. It's called Bloom, right? Yeah. Bloom Marketing for Herbalists. So we can leave a link for that in the show notes. Oh. So I'm going to do the cliche desert question. I have to do it. You're going to do it.
Yeah. Okay. If you could have...
I'm preparing myself.
If you could have one plant and one Tory album to take with you to a desert island, what would those be? I have to know.
Oh my gosh. I would take my wish and wish for 1,000 wishes. Is that what your question was?
Yes. That's cheating, though.
Okay. Well, oh man, Mason.
I know. It was impossible.
It's impossible. You know what I often say? Yeah. I often call yarrow my desert island plant. Not because it's my most favorite plant, but as like a teaching tool because it does so many things. Yarrow has so many gifts, often like first aid related and like acute injury and stuff. So I'm like, if it was a literal desert island, yarrow would be the plant that could like save my life.
Good answer.
So it can, you know, you could rub it on to keep the mosquitoes at bay and you can chew on it for a toothache. You can drink it for a sore throat. Promote digestion, relieve pain. So yarrow is like the literal desert island plant. And that's just it, right?
Sure.
We're just done now.
Yeah.
I can't talk about like roses or nettle or violets.
Yeah. You already chose your plant. But what about the Tori Amos album? And do you want to kind of like share with the audience, maybe say 60 seconds on your love of Tori Amos?
60 seconds?
Yeah, maybe 120 seconds. Maybe 180 seconds.
I first heard Tori Amos in 1992 when I was 12 years old, and she became my favorite musical artist of all time. Yeah. And I've spent a good portion of my life following her around, seeing her tours and stuff. And in 2017, I went to Ireland, and I wanted to give her a copy of my first book, which I had acknowledged her in because she is the soundtrack of my life. And we had a short conversation. I met with her. We had a short conversation in which she inspired my second book, Wild Remedies.
Very cool.
Yeah. And this year, I'm looking forward to seeing her at Red Rocks in Seattle. And yeah, so slightly obsessed. I mentioned I have an obsessive personality.
That's right.
We actually had to turn off Tori on the in the speakers in the house for this interview.
Right.
I wanted to leave them on.
Yeah. YouTube would not like that, but right on.
Well, but I didn't answer. Oh, I shouldn't have called that out. I don't know.
What's that?
What Tori Amos album?
Yeah, if you could maybe choose one, I would love to hear it. I'd love to hear your answer.
I feel like I'm have a cold sweat right now.
Maybe you could cheat and say it's like one of those compilation
Like the greatest
albums.
hits.
Yeah.
I know, her albums are so good. You know, like a lot of
right.
people now have like singles, like her
Right.
entire albums. They tell a story from start to finish. I'd go with Boys for Pele again, not because I
That's the
could
one.
name a favorite,
Right.
but it's just a powerful album.
Boys for Pele. All right. Yeah. So you also have a podcast, which you've been releasing episodes, for a couple years now?
Yeah, a couple years now.
So that's the Herbs with Rosalie podcast. Oh my goodness, I was on that show.
You were on that show, yeah.
That was super fun. I really love your format too. You kind of, I want to say, you get to know the herbalist, and then you always talk about one specific plant, and then the guest always has some sort of recipe associated with it, which I believe you provide like PDFs for each episode. Super cool. And then you always end it with like each season has a different question, which is always fun. But yeah, great interviews, great guests. Anything else you want to say about the show?
Not too long ago, I was at our local health food store, and the cashier told me that her favorite episode was the guy who talked about oats.
That's right.
Mason, she said she listened to it twice.
I can't believe that. Like, just the saying of the favorite episode, but then saying they listened to it again, that means a lot to me. So.
You know, it was funny when I first told you that.
Yeah.
You were like, wow, and that's so cool the cashier knew who you were. Yeah. But later on today, we're about to go to town. You're going to see that that's not actually that impressive.
Right. There's like 100 people downtown.
Yeah, we all know each other.
Still, though, that's pretty neat. Yeah, I was really stoked to hear that. That was fun. Yeah, so I shared a savory oatmeal recipe. I remember that. That was a lot of fun to. And for that episode, for 30 days, I don't know if you remember, I did a oat straw every day.
Yes.
Milky oats and tincture, oatmeal, and then Robin Rose Bennett's oat straw meditation. So, anyways, I don't remember what episode number that was, but I'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. But yeah, again, Alchemy of Herbs, Wild Remedies, and herbswithrosalie.com is your website. You could follow her on Instagram at Rosalie de la Forêt.
But
TikTok?
the best place to stay in touch is on my newsletter.
That's right.
I
And you
write
actually have
people every
some
Wednesday.
sort of course giveaway for that too, don't you?
Yeah,
Or
an herbal energetics course.
Herbal Energetics. And how do they sign up for the newsletter?
If you go to herbswithrosalie.com, then there's a sign up right there.
Sweet. Easy peasy. We end all the shows on this last question. At least that's what we're doing for now. What's your big why that keeps you learning and growing as an herbalist? Did I say that right? Okay.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is that earth connection that we talked a lot about. So that it really does come back to that. But that, not just from the knowledge base, but that sinking deeper into that connection. And I feel like that's something that doesn't just come from the books, but comes from being outside with the plants. And I think I mentioned this already too, but one of my greatest pleasures is watching students in the Rooted Medicine Circle. We go through a journey together because it's a year-long course, and I watch people also make that journey of creating more awareness outside, creating moments of awe, and having that connection. And that really, we had some couple rough years, 2020, 2021. Yeah, rough years where a lot of people were really struggling. I those were great years for me in that we just started that program and I was watching these people go through that transformation, and it gave me so much hope and so much joy. They lifted my spirits by just being able to experience that with them. And that also is just very, keeps me going, keeps me inspired.
I love that. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Herbalist Hour, Rosalie.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Thanks for coming over.
Yeah,
See
yeah,
me.
this has been awesome. Amanda and I have been enjoying our stay quite a bit, and so thanks y'all for listening / watching, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the Herb Rally podcast. If you'd like to hear more from us here at Herb Rally, we now have a text message community, believe it or not. Basically, it's just updates from us. We send about 1 to 7 texts per week, notifying you about new events, videos, courses, podcasts. You get the idea. It's pretty much like our email newsletter, just in text form. So if you'd like to receive text messages from Herb Rally, just text JOIN, that's JOIN, to the number 541-256-2895. Again, that's JOIN to number 541-256-2895. And to stop receiving texts, that's easy too. Just text STOP to the same number. It'll opt you out immediately. Okay, thanks again for listening. Have a great rest of your day.